A proud DC Bar member benefit, LawPay makes it easy to securely accept payments anytime from anywhere. Their proprietary technology prevents commingling of earned and unearned funds and protects your trust account against any third-party debiting, ensuring compliance with ABA and IOLTA guidelines. Schedule a demo at lawpay.com/DCBar and see why LawPay is trusted by 50,000 law firms. MyCase is a top-rated end-to-end legal case management software that helps firms run efficiently from anywhere, provide exceptional client experience, and easily track firm performance. Streamline day-to-day firm processes in one easy-to-adopt solution. Lead tracking, client intake, case management, e-signature, billing payments, and more. DC Bar members are eligible for a 10% lifetime discount. Start your free trial, no credit card required, today.
Hi, everyone. This is Kirk Schroeder. I'm an entertainment lawyer with the law firm of Schroeder Brooks, and I'm pleased to give you, on behalf of Brief Encounters for the DC Bar Communities, part 2 of our discussion on music publishing and licensing. And I have with me the continuation from part 1, our guest, Jeff Braybeck, who's an executive with BMG, and Todd Braybeck, who used to be with ASCAP and is now consulting all over on music publishing. Tell me your titles real quick, because you guys are close friends. I don't even think of y'all as titles. Jeff, where are you at right now?
Yeah, I'm a Senior Vice President, Legal and Business Affairs for BMG Rights Management. We're the 4th largest music publishing company in the world, and we've also started a record division, which is mainly based around BBR Records down in Nashville. So we've gone both sides of the equation, both the song side and the master recording side.
Okay. And Todd, I know you were with ASCAP.
Yeah, for many decades, I was Executive Vice President and Worldwide Director of Membership for ASCAP. I'm an entertainment attorney. I teach at USC, a course on exactly what we're going to be speaking about tonight. So, and I consult, a lot these days, and I'm a lot of expert witness testimony and opinions. I'm normally brought in by law firms these days.
And for our audience, Todd and Jeff have, I think, what is the premier book on music publishing law and the business practices, and that is Music, Money, and Success, which I think is now in its 8th edition. Is that right?
8th currently, yep.
Yes, I highly recommend, if you are an entertainment attorney or just someone in the music publishing industry, the Braybeck book on music, money, and success and music publishing. So as mentioned, this is a part 2 of a podcast on music sync licensing. Part 1, we focused on film and motion picture. Today, we're going to talk about television programming. And I'm just going to let's just get the ball rolling. Who wants to talk about just some of the basic considerations on licensing music for television program?
Yeah, this is Jeff. I'll kind of give you a real overview first of the opportunities involved. This is an area where, if you're a music publisher, songwriter, or even if you're a record company, is extremely valuable for opportunities. Before the pandemic, and this will get back to the same level, there were over 475 scripted TV series in the United States on an annual basis. Now, you're talking about scripted series, you're talking about anywhere from 8 episodes to 22 to 24 episodes. So as you can see, there's an enormous opportunity for music and music licensing in many of these scripted series. What we're going to talk about today, we're not going to talk about writing for music for a television show. We're going to talk about the licensing of pre-existing musical compositions, and much of what we're going to talk about has to do with record companies and master recordings as well, because in many respects, if you're using a song in many of these scripted series, you're also using the original master recording or re-recorded recording, other than the music-centric shows where you've got a performer actually singing, but I'll actually get into that.
How do they go about finding music? What's the basic shopping method in this? Because I'm sure we have some lawyers who have independent musicians and composers that have masters, and I'm sure they're probably wondering, how is music discovered for television programming?
Well, a lot of this discovery comes from the music supervisors for the various shows. Because in most scripted series, you've got a music supervisor who is at least suggesting music. And these people have an enormous ability to really know various genres, various ages of music, who recorded what record companies are easy to deal with, what music publishers are easy to deal with, what songs need approval by the writers, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of considerations that go in, but it's really the music supervisors are extremely important. I know BMG, we've got a staff that just promotes music, either by samplers, digital samplers, CD samplers, you name it. And, we're targeting, as our other publishers, we're targeting all the various shows. And in order to target well, you better have watched the programming because, if you're not sending in songs or master recordings that have absolutely no relevance to the type of music and type of plot that's being and era, that's involved with the particular show. So it's a very sophisticated science. And, the large music publishers, we've got songs dating from, the 1920s through 1922. So a lot of us can fill in a lot of blanks depending on what the series is looking for.
And you all have an operation, as you said, that targets. So, for those lawyers that are listening and you have independent musicians, it's really targeting in a sophisticated and professional way. Music supervisors are those that will be actually making the selection for the programming. And, that may be a taller task, just given how competitive the field is in this regard, given the amount of money that's at stake.
Let me just mention one other thing about the market. If you look at the TV Guide magazine, there are 88 particular channels, cable channels, over-the-air channels, et cetera. So you've got all these channels running music and series and episodes. Then you've got all the various streaming services, the Netflix, the Amazon Primes, Hulu's, Disney Plus, Apple TV, et cetera, also programmed. So I just wanted to emphasize once again that there's a lot of opportunity out there for the placement of music.
So we know that there's a big audience here. What are the types of sync licenses for music in the television space?
Yeah, there are two basic types of primary licenses that are in the synchronization space. And basically what we're dealing with is something called a synchronization license. It's the insertion or the including of music into an audiovisual work, as simple as that, whether you're on the record side, which is many times called just a master recording agreement. But on the publishing side, it's a music synchronization agreement. There are two types of licenses, primary, depending on the type of show. You've got dramatic series, and you've got the music and dance-centric series, such as The Voice, The Masked Singer, et cetera. I'm going to deal with the dramatic series first, because that's a much more straightforward license than the music-centric series. I'll give you a quick example. And what we're dealing with here are life of copyright licenses. So when you actually license a song into an episode of a TV series, you're licensing it for the life of copyright. They can distribute that episode for the life of copyright of the song. There is a one-time fee in almost all cases, which covers an awful lot of rights, very broad rights, and I'll get into that very quickly. And the requests are fairly straightforward. They usually come in via email. And I'll give you an exact specific example from the marvelous Ms. Maisel, who uses quite a bit of music in their television episodes. And basically it comes in, it's addressed to the synchronization people at a company, whether it be the publisher or the record company. And it's entitled Synchronization Quote Request. They give the name of the program. They say, we are interested in clearing the following composition for use in the show, et cetera, et cetera. They also many times give a synopsis of the show. So before the season ever started, you got an idea what it's all about.
Do they already know what songs they want, or are they asking you to throw some songs at them?
In this case, they know what songs that they want.
Got it. Okay.
They're music supervisor. We may have sent a bunch of songs in, but these, you get a specific request. On occasion, they'll ask you for suggestions, but most times they know what songs they want to use. And basically, they'll list the composition, the title, the writers, use timing. The use in this particular one was background vocal up to 3 minutes. So you knew that it was going to be in the background of a scene, more than likely, no more than 3 minutes. Normally in these situations, they want as much leeway as possible. So a lot of times they'll say 3 minutes because the scene has not been shot yet, or it's been shot and they haven't decided how long the scene will be. So they like to give themselves some leeway. And then very important, the territory is always the world or the universe. More than likely, in almost all contracts now, it's the universe. Why be restricted in this area? And also the term is life of copyright. Now, a lot of TV companies and motion picture companies use the words in perpetuity, but you can only license something while it's under copyright. So we always cross out in perpetuity, put life of copyright. For some reason, they think they're getting more rights in a longer term. But
because you have a public domain issues that come up after that.
Exactly. And then they've got a fee with a blank space, and you are requested to put your fee in what you're suggesting. So it's a very straightforward process. Depending on the fee you put in, there might be a negotiation back and forth. And also, one last thing, depending on the scene description, if the scene description is fairly vague, then you might want to have additional information so you know exactly what's happening in the scene, whether it's comedic, whether it's not comedic. And if there's a change of lyrics, that will always be in the request. And if there's a change of lyrics, you always ask for what the change is, because a change many times can really affect the future earning power of a song. If it's very substantive and sticks in people's minds, sometimes you might lose uses in the future from motion picture companies, advertisers, because it's become so identifiable with the change of lyrics. So you've got to watch yourself in that situation.
Yeah. Now, let me ask real quick on the scene description. That's really critical, because I guess, are you always having to go back to your writers and ask them if they approve, or if it's something funky that you're not sure about, do you just take it on a case-by-case basis?
Many times it depends on what your contract says, first of all. If there are no restrictions in the agreement and we feel that it's a good use, then we will just quote. Now, that's why the legal department is very important, because, we kind of tell the synchronization department what songs have to be, used, where the writer has permission rights and, consent rights, and where they do not. Many times the writers have consent over certain types of scenes, violence, sexual, et cetera, et cetera. And other times they've got approval over all rights, depending on bargaining power. But we'll play it by ear many times. Contractually, if we have to go to a writer, obviously we will go, and as much information as the writer needs we'll get. And if there is no approval rights involved, then it's going to be our decision as to whether we feel the use is acceptable or not.
So really, for our audience, the scene description is really important, because you don't want to create any confusion or make your staff have to figure out what's really going on. What about changes? Who owns the copyright on the changes to the song? The master is owned by the TV company, and the underlying music, or any change in lyrics, how is that handled?
The lyric change would actually be owned by the production company, but they would not be allowed to use that with the composition, without our permission.
Got it. Okay.
There could be two separate copyrights: one for the new set of the lyric change. And obviously, we own the copyright to the composition and to all the musical and other elements.
Yeah. So obviously, they can go copyright the lyric change, but the underlying composition, they can't do anything without the consent of the underlying composition anyway.
No, not at all. In fact, all of these licenses, the song is put into a specific scene. They cannot take that new song, and start putting into other scenes without our permission, using it in promos, using it in other TV series or episodes, et cetera. So these licenses are specific to one particular scene in one particular episode. And they're linear licenses, where we're not involved in people able to change, take the song out and put it into another, scene, et cetera. That will come in the future.
Yeah.
But that's a whole nother element that we'll be dealing with in the future.
Let me ask, and maybe jumping ahead. So you talked about single buyout fee. Does that include musical soundtrack, album soundtrack for the TV show or anything like that?
No, not at all. Basically, dramatic TV shows are licensed under what is known as a life of copyright, worldwide, broad rights, all media, excluding theatrical license. So you can basically distribute that episode into any and all media, excluding, you can't put it into motion picture theaters. That's the only exclusion. Now, in the past, a couple times, the Game of Thrones TV series actually put 2 of their episodes in the motion picture theaters a few years back. So that would be a different type of license. And also, I just want to mention one thing. In this type of license, when it says all media, this includes DVDs, There's an entire video buyout, home video buyout.
The soundtrack album for the TV show, it's included.
No, the soundtrack album, there will be an agreement that you will get a mechanical royalty.
Okay.
It could be statutory, could be reduced rate depending on the control composition clause, but we normally try to get the statutory 9.1 cent.
And so you won't have any controlled compositions or anything like that, as you might find in the traditional songwriter deal. Is really the point I was getting to.
Yeah, I've seen him in certain soundtrack albums, but if it's a digital album, you'll normally get straight statutory.
Got it. Great. So when are there back-end royalties, if any?
The back-end royalty situation is it'll happen automatically for practically any composition if, in effect, that performance right is involved. Just to back up quickly, because the back-end royalties are really one of the most important reasons that for when you're negotiating a sync license, or even if you're writing original compositions or scores for TV episodes and stuff, because you're getting a one-time fee, as Jeff said, for the sync license. But then what happens then when that particular episode is broadcast? And that's really called back-end royalties. And these are the royalties that every time a program is aired anywhere in the United States or throughout the world for life of copyright, there's a performance right involved. And all that means is that under the performance right of the copyright law of the US and other countries, anytime you use a copyrighted composition and perform it, there's permission needs to be granted and hopefully compensation paid. So you can't use copyrighted works in audiovisual products without getting permission to actually perform that thing. Performance licenses would be broadcasters would take it out, streaming services would take it out, and they take it out from 4 organizations. They're called performing rights organizations: ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, and GMR in the United States. And what these organizations do, writers and publishers, songwriters, composers, and publishers join these organizations, and these organizations negotiate license fees with the users of music. Let's say ABC TV network or Netflix or Amazon or whomever. They collect the money from the license fees and then they pay it back to the writers and publishers who have works performed. So that's really, and that goes on for the life of the copyright. So, you have an extraordinary amount of money that can be made just in the performance royalties for US and foreign performances.
So Todd, just for our audience, I know, Jeff, we were talking mainly about procuring the sync license, which essentially will be that buyout in all media, with the exception of motion picture and the metaverse, which we may be able to touch on at the end. And now, Todd, you're talking about if you are the one licensing the music, you're getting the buyout fee on the sync license for TV, but now you need to collect the publishing royalties, right?
Yeah,
from the performance rights.
It's the continuing royalties every time that episode is aired anywhere in the world for the life of copyright. So, and how they work is the publisher and the writer collect this money separately. These performing rights organizations, they pay the writers separately and the publishers separately, 50-50. So let's say if you had a song on The Voice and with a 2-minute song, it might generate $2,500 to the writer, $2,500 to the publisher. Those fees are paid directly just for that one performance. So, I could go down the list. HBO would be less than that. You go to the audiovisual streaming services, you're talking about millimeters per performance based on traditional media. But that's really how it works. That's called back-end royalties.
Got it. Okay. And then how important are music cue sheets in this? I assume that's going to be very critical in tracking the monetary end of this.
Yeah, with music cue sheets, they have to be circulated throughout all these performing rights organizations, because let's say you negotiate a license with ABC Television Network. The ABC will provide cue sheets of every show on their network. They'll give it to the PROs, who then will use that to actually pay the writers and publishers for the performances in that particular show. So cue sheets are essential to getting paid. And a cue sheet will list the writer's names, the publisher's name, how the work is used, whether it's background score, a theme, a promo, a logo, a visual vocal. All of that affects the payment. And it'll list the PRO that the person is a member of, as well as who the publisher is.
If I'm representing the musician who's licensing out the sync for TV, what am I looking for in the provisions regarding cue sheets? Is there anything I want to make sure contractually needs to be in the standard contract regarding the cue sheets?
Yeah, and this is very standard. Basically, there's a whole clause in all of our synchronization licenses, and should be in any synchronization license, that the cue sheet should be supplied within 30 days, could be maximum 60 days of the airing of the actual episode. So you want to get to look at the cue sheet to make sure that the way you license a song, let's say you license it for a visual vocal up to 30 seconds, you want to make sure that the cue sheet doesn't say it's licensed as a background vocal for a minute and a half. So they basically, you're checking the cue sheet information versus what you've actually licensed the production company. And if there are any mistakes in the cue sheet, like misspellings, wrong performance rights affiliation, et cetera, and it does happen, you correct it right away, because these cue sheets are being distributed throughout the world to various foreign countries where the episodes might be actually broadcast.
Now, for the novice attorney who's looking at a sync license for the first time, as you mentioned, a lot of this is standard, especially when you're dealing with the major publishers. What are some of the key things that one might target in the standard form, if anything, besides the economics?
The forms are pretty straightforward. They're usually about 3 to 4, 5 pages tops, and really just it goes. The grant of rights is very broad. The types of distribution. They'll mention free TV, basic TV, pay cable, video on demand, all TV, streaming, internet, et cetera, videograms, home video stuff. There's an indemnification clause. If there are any options, so the options will be in the agreement. It's fairly straightforward. It does talk about linear TV so that you can put it into an interactive situation, but it's a fairly straightforward license. There's usually a schedule at the end that has the territory, the term, the licensed use, and whether there's a most favored nations clause, which I can get into in a moment, which occurs in the music centric shows. But it's a very straightforward agreement. We've got a copy of the agreement in the book Music, Money, and Success.
Sure. And I'm going to talk about dramatization, but I think it's important for our audience to know, especially for the novice attorney, when you get these forms, they're not highly negotiable instruments. And you don't want to make the mistake of trying to mark up something and send it to Jeff, because he'll probably roll his eyes and realize that you're not really understanding some of the customs of how this works. Like dramatization of a song, I just want to keep us on track from a time standpoint and music centric productions.
Let me briefly, because these shows are very popular, let me talk about the other type of license, which has to do with the music-centric and dance-centric shows. The American Idols, which is on right now, Voice, America's Got Talent, The Masked Singer, that wonderful show. Basically, the difference between these shows and the dramatic series are, because of they're fairly geocentric and they're fairly topical, the territory is very limited. Take The Voice, where there's a voice show in almost every country of the world. I think it started in Belgium or Holland, I forget. But no one overseas wants to see the US Voice, not many anyway, and vice versa. So basically, all of these licenses in this music genre type of show are fairly short-term and fairly limited geographically. Most of them are US and Canada only. And then either is for 1 or 2 years, because they're topical. There's another voice every 6 months, et cetera, et cetera. So you don't have long-term licenses. This actually affects the fee as well, because the fees are much lower because you're licensing for less duration or less territorial. But the fascinating thing about the licenses, first of all, they're all on a most favored nations basis, which means that every song that goes into one of these shows, everyone is paid the same. Every publisher is paid the same. Every record company is paid the same, depending on how it's used. And basically the criteria in most of these shows are duration. I'll give you a quick example. The Voice has 2 durational aspects. One from up to 1 minute and 30. There's a certain price range. Over 1 minute and 30, there's a separate price range. America's Got Talent has 3 categories. American Idol has 3 categories, all with different price points, depending on how the song is used.
Yeah, so just so our audience can visualize this, when a talent performer comes out to compete, so to speak, how long they're performing that song will affect the publishing rights and what that license looks like.
Yeah, that's totally correct. And also, because these are very limited licenses, you've got a lot of option, because the producer might want to extend the license, their duration, the territory, et cetera. So you've got a lot of option, all with different fees. I'll just give you a couple quick examples. If the license is for US and Canada, the producer will have a license to extend to the world for an additional fee, or to extend for an additional 2 years if it's only a 2-year license. There's a cross-clearance license in some of these shows where the actual episode can be performed in the View on the View the next day, or live with Kelly the next day. There's permanent downloads. There's a Jumbotron option, so you think you can dance. There's a tour after the end of the show, and there's a Jumbotron on stage. And if the scene with your song is on that Jumbotron, then you're going to get an additional fee. The options are amazing. One fascinating one, this is The Voice. There's an additional fee for impromptu vocalizing, not to exceed 10 seconds, on stage during dialogue with coaches, etc. The options are, I've seen 10
Well,
to
it's just
12
because the
options.
songs can be monetized in so many different ways.
The great thing about the options is that since the initial fees are low, if all the options are exercised, you're going to be getting the amount of money that you would have actually gotten had you licensed it for a dramatic show.
Great. I want to just keep track for our time. I just want to say to our audience, if you're representing a performer on one of those shows, they pretty much own you. And those agreements are pretty aggressive. So this is not going to relate so much to you and your client as it will relate to the music publisher, as well as the production company putting on the show. We've just got maybe just a minute or two here. Where's the future going with the metaverse? Or is there even a model right now on these sort of the new technologies and what they might present in that experience? Is there anything unfolding there?
It's in a state of fluctuation right now. All of us are dealing with the metaverse, and it really depends on your definitions in your license agreement, whether or not the territory would include the metaverse or not. It all has to do with language and restrictions in your agreement, et cetera. So it's in a state of fluctuation right now.
Really understanding what the metaverse is, because most people don't really get what it is. Similar to the NFT period right now, people are still figuring out, particularly as far as music goes, what type of licenses actually apply and what you're actually negotiating. So state of flux, I think, is a good answer.
All right. Well, we could just keep talking. This is a topic that could just go on for hours, but this has been a fast run through. Again, I just want to remind our audience, if you didn't get a chance to listen to part one, that focused entirely on film and motion picture sync licenses. We've been talking today about television programming. Last words or thoughts, Jeff and Todd, each one of you, any last words or advice, either from the licensor or the licensee perspective?
Yeah, one thing I'll say, keep in mind, TV is on a very short time frame. So you had better know what you're doing, because if you can't make up your mind quickly or know what a license looks like, you're not going to get the license.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity, but you better be ready to respond quickly, because these shows are being shot on a daily basis and they can't afford to wait. If you start looking like an amateur, you start overvaluing your composition, especially you've got to recognize that there are music budgets. You're going to lose opportunities as opposed to creating them. And if you lose an opportunity, you've not only lost the synchronization license, the upfront license, but you've lost all the back-end royalties. So you've got to know what you're doing and respond quickly,
as well as them coming back to you again.
And you're good, very good point, Todd. And the relationship, you probably lost the relationship. All right, Todd Brayback, Jeff Brayback, you guys are awesome. I'm so grateful that y'all could do this today. This is Kirk Schroeder with Schroeder Brooks Law Firm, and this has been a great podcast. I recommend, again, part one and their book, Music, Money, and Success, the 8th edition, if you want to know everything about music publishing. Thanks to the DC Bar and Brief Encounters, and wish everybody well. And hopefully we'll have some more entertainment law topics soon.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you very much.
This episode of Brief Encounters was brought to you in part by our sponsors LawPay and MyCase. Find out how these solutions can work for you by visiting lawpay.com and mycase.com. For more information, check out the description of this episode.